Instead of running away from challenges every day, I actually run towards them, because within that challenge is actually very, very likely I am going to find a level of engagement and happiness and fulfillment. If you're feeling that the season is finished, then get up and move. Don't stay in that and stagnate, because there's so much opportunity out there in terms of language. Relentless change, continuous change is something that you become used to when you're working in this industry. Arguably, if you step out of the industry, it's the very thing you end up missing. When you start to break it down, you begin to realize, how did I ever get anything done without really planning the day ahead of me? No wonder you get home and you're tired.
Welcome to the iGaming Leader, the podcast where we uncover the human side of some of the most well-respected leaders in the industry. I'm your host, Leo Judkins, and today I'm joined by Rob Duthie, a true industry veteran. He's been in the industry for over 20 years, starting out at Victor Chandler, nowadays BV Group, working at Stan James, nowadays Kindred, and ending up as the managing director at Entain. He will share the lessons that he's learned throughout that 20-year career, the challenges that he's faced, and also leadership lessons that will help you and I uncover what is required to sustain high performance in this high-pressure, fast-paced industry. So with that said, let's dive in. Hey Rob, welcome to the iGaming Leader podcast. Really great to have you here. I wanted to start with kind of kicking off. You've been in the industry for 20 years, I believe, when I looked at your LinkedIn. Very long-term and passionate person in the industry. And starting back in 2003, I'm curious to hear what initially drew you into the industry, and how's your perspective perhaps changed as you've gone through those 2 decades in gaming?
Yeah, look, it's been a fascinating journey for me. I had no intention of moving into gaming at all. In fact, moving down to southern Spain was a desire to get away from UK weather. It was just an opportunity where I was very fortunate to go and take on a maternity cover role with Victor Chandler. I knew nothing about the industry at all, and ended up looking after payrolls for the UK and Gibraltar. So, there was no intention of joining the industry, but 20 years has gone by, and it's been a fascinating journey from back in 2000s, early 2000s, where everything was on the telephone and it was all sports betting. We had a single person in the corner looking at something called an internet casino or casino online. Now, there isn't any telephony or very little of it, and everything is pretty much digital for us. So what an exciting journey it has been over the last 20 years. Lots of variety.
Yeah, funny. I was thinking about it yesterday as well. How you used to have the mobile department. It just doesn't exist anymore. And on that same thought, Rob, you must have seen so many consolidations, not just within the business that you're in now, but consolidations in general, right? How teams merge and expand and change over time. What are some of the big and most impactful changes that you've witnessed or been part of?
Yeah, look, I think the journey for me has been fascinating because I've been very fortunate to move between different operators, which gives you quite a different perspective on how these businesses run. The tenure that I've had I've worked for operators. I've worked in payment-specific areas, understanding the whole infrastructure around how we deal with payments from the acquirer point of view and the routing point of view for different industries, whether it's Forex or binary or gaming. So what I find fascinating about this industry is that there is so much variety sitting within this business. In fact, when we talk about progression, individual progression, they typically think about this industry as just taking a bet. But actually, if you dig into it, it's about marketing, it's about legal, it's about compliance, it's about acquisition. There's so much variety within the industry. I've been very fortunate to be a part of a lot of that, which has helped me grow as a person, over the last 20 years. So, that coupled with the fact that it's such a fast-paced, moving environment in terms of language, relentless change, continuous change, is something that you become used to when you're working in this industry. Arguably, if you step out of the industry, it's the very thing you end up missing. Yeah. It's just the pace at which you move. There's very few other industries that match it. That could be quite a motivational piece, quite an energizing piece of the work that I do.
I love that. It's such a fast-paced industry, and sometimes that brings big challenges with it as well, where we want to look at the long term, but we have to look at the short term to deliver results. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've personally faced in your professional career when it comes to this real fast pace that this industry is all about?
So some of the points for me is that you have to embrace the change. You've got to be in a position where if you feel you want to fit into a box and that's what you want to do for the rest of your days, then you're going to struggle because you will come up against having to reinvent what it is that you do. Because in a year or 2 years' time or 5 years' time, it's very likely that it will not be the same. The operation won't be the same. The types of positions and jobs that we have won't be the same. In terms of my own journey, there's some key learnings around finding happiness and engagement in the challenge, in the change of everything that we do every day. By embracing that, I actually have lots of reasons to get up in the morning to come to work because there is so much variety. And the minute you stick your hand up and say yes, you start learning and you start growing. And I don't think I'll ever stop learning or growing in this career because it's always changing for me.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that's true for most people. If you think back to, I mean, you've been at Victor Chandler, been at Hills, now at Entain. Like, what were some of the most pivotal moments when it comes to maybe how you approach leadership in general, or how you manage your teams, how you speak to your people? What have been some of the biggest moments for you that have really changed the way you see leadership or how you lead your teams?
Yeah, so because we're in this continuous change, at the root of everything we do are the people. And that's quite a key point because all of us get carried away by the target, by what do we have to do around the number and how much we have to deliver. But there's a very real lesson in understanding the difference between how we perform, so how we turn up every day and what we do, versus the targets that we are set we have to deliver against. We've got to ask those questions about, fine, we hit target. Okay, we did very well in terms of the number, but how did we perform and turn up every day to hit that target? And we've got to make a decision as individuals to say yes, in terms of our behavior, in terms of how we look after individuals and teams and people, because we all want to have that opportunity to develop. We all want to have the opportunity to grow and to learn. But the key is, how do we perform every day as people? That means that we actually end up hitting the target. There might be occasions when you don't hit the target, but you're comfortable that in terms of behavior and how we turned up and what we did was acceptable.
Yeah.
All right. Versus hitting the target at any cost and not looking after individuals or the way that we run the business, especially when we're dealing with vulnerable customers, people that are struggling in the industry. We have to take accountability for that. So, what I love about the last 2 tenures that I've had at Hills and Entain is that at William Hill 2016, that's really when we had the start of regulation and started taking it seriously in terms of affordability, knowing your customer, source of funds and source of wealth. That's when we started to take it seriously. The one consistent area for all operators, especially in the UK market, is that impacts value. Customer value has been hit across every operator in the UK because of regulation and how we run our business. And so at Hills, the 4 years that I had at William Hill was all about the start of that piece. Where I'm super unfortunate to be right now is that we are at Entain. I came and joined Entain at 2020. Again, that was the start of that journey for Entain. You will see that reflected in the share price and the way the business is moving around, consolidating, restructuring, to where we are now coming out the other side at a very exciting time. In fact, we talk internally that these will be the most exciting times that we will see in the next 24 months, just in terms of how we grow as a business and how we take share of wallet in the UK.
I love how you've turned the business around. Just that recent financial update is insane. I was fortunate enough to see some of that a little bit closer by, working together with you guys. How has that affected the team, Rob? After such a tough time, turning that around into a quarter where you perform the way that you've just done, specifically in the UK, but internationally as well. How's that affected everybody?
Since 2020, we've had continuous decrease in value. In player value. And the challenge on individuals is that when you try and hit a target that is very difficult to hit, that starts eroding away in terms of your engagement and your motivation.
Yeah.
You'll laugh at this, but the challenge we have today is not around the success. So we are performing well, and we will continue to perform well. But there is a lot of fatigue, a lot of change fatigue that everybody is carrying. How we get people to jump over that divide to say, look, yes, we do well as a business, but actually now we need to invest heavily in our people that are, that are tired. Yeah? They're tired of having to go through the restructures and the changes over the last couple of years, along with the challenges of performance. It's how you change that mindset. And that's something we're really focusing on now, is that we need to have fun. Yeah? People need to have fun. They come to work to have fun, and we get paid, and that's fantastic. But we really need to enjoy the journey. So we are focusing on getting back to the basics. Yeah, how do you deal with those brilliant basics in terms of development and progression, succession planning? Because people want to move on. Yeah, that's an exciting place for us to be, because the focus now is on the people. The focus is on the performance piece, because we know that the targets are realistic, and we know we're going to achieve the results that we need to achieve.
Yeah, I love it. I love how it's turned around. It's really amazing. And I can see that makes a lot of sense as well. When you've gone through so many changes, that fatigue starts trickling in. How do you keep people engaged? What's your approach to making sure that your team feels engaged with business, with your strategic direction that you're setting, with still delivering and making sure that they come to work and have fun, like you said?
So for us, it's understanding very clearly what those objectives are for us as a business. We call them the big rocks. What are the big rocks that we want to deliver against in 2025? The story needs to be super simple. The last 4 years have been spent making things very complex. In the complexity, people lose sight of where it is we're going and what it is we're trying to achieve. Stripping that back to a very simple story that has very, very clear objectives. And then more importantly, what I really love is how we as individuals take the skills that we have. Okay. So instead of us going to people and saying, here's the objective, and I need you to do this, we talk to people about what is your skill set and how do you tie into being accountable and responsible with the new objective. And that encourages cross teamwork. People are now doing what they're really passionate about doing, which is why we want to come to work, as opposed to being told you need to be doing X, Y, and Z. Yeah. So the way that we work with our guys is we talk about the big rocks, the big things we want to deliver for next year. If you go a little deeper on that and peel it back, what are we need to achieve within our verticals, within our pillars to achieve those objectives? And then drill it down again into the individual. What are the skill sets you have and how do those tie in? It could be across multiple functions or pillars. Let's focus on what you're good at as opposed to all the weak areas. That then gets people engaged because they have a clear sense of where they're going, okay? And they have a very clear idea of what they've got to do to get there. That's when the magic starts happening and people feel like they want to be here because they're adding value. Yeah, and that's very exciting for us to be.
Yeah, love that, Rob. I'd like to ask about your personal experience with people you've looked up to, leaders you've looked up to. I've also worked for Victor, and I understand it's very different than I'd imagine your current situation at work, where it's obviously a larger organization. What are some of the people that you've really looked up to, leaders that you've looked up to throughout that 20-year career of yours, that, the skills, the behaviors, the habits that you feel were really kind of transformational for you when you looked at them? I thought those are things I want as I'm progressing through my career.
Yeah, so some key points for me in terms of leadership is you don't always have to have the answer. So when people are coming to talk to you about their journey, it's not about saying this is what you need to do. What I really respect with leaders is having the insight to help you understand what the solution is and the ability to say something very simple that gets you thinking about a problem in a different way. I've been fortunate to run across a couple of guys like that where I might be overthinking something and they will just call me back on the line to say, well, just if we think about it differently, what is the outcome going to be for you? And exploring that. It's a little bit like getting into coaching. We know that you turn up to a coaching session expecting the person on the other side to have all the answers. And actually, that's not their job. Their job is to sit with you and help you understand what is the right answer for you. And it's the questioning techniques and it's allowing you to explore those areas that you wouldn't necessarily do on your own. That for me is quite key. In terms of leadership as well, it's, the most engaging leaders that I've worked with are people that bring everybody along the journey. That's quite a skill because storytelling is rarely how it works within our business. Being able to tell a story that people believe, that could be through change as well, because people have to understand that the reason why we are making the change is good for the business, and that there's some deep thought that's gone into it, and it is going to benefit the business. When people realize that, regardless of the outcome, you understand the reason why. And as long as it's meaningful and it makes sense, then people engage with it. And so you go through a lot of transformation. We just really want to cut costs at any cost. And there's blood on the floor. There's a lot of casualties. And people are confused. They don't understand why we've gone through this change, and they take it personally. Whereas when you've thought it through and you've come with a very clear business plan, people can tuck into that, even if it's not good news for them. There's just a couple of examples. I always love to think about, Wesley from the Springboks, who's the sole coach.
Water boy.
I've spent quite a bit of time watching how he's managed to take a team that wants to win, but actually there's a connection within each one of those players. It means they have to win. It's not about we just turning up. It's not about we're going to play another game, but it's the ability that Rassi has on his players to actually connect the winning piece with the motivation that they have. And that's a very exciting place to be, because that's where the magic happens, and that's when you can win things.
I really love that. And I always love the example of connecting sports with business, because that high performance environment that we see in sports is really something that we want to recreate in business, but it's often very difficult, right? Because there's not a South African shirt that you're playing for, or it's a brand that you're playing for. And so it's obviously different. But I wanted to tie back to something you said earlier about giving people space and asking the right questions and creating that sense of, all right, let me think about this problem differently, right? One of the things that I see a lot with people that are perhaps a little bit newer into leadership roles is that they feel they have to have all the answers, and they have to be telling rather than asking. It's a typical issue that many people struggle with, because they feel if they tell and they don't ask, it's an easier way to get to the result that they want. And you must have seen that a lot around you, right, over the years, these kind of challenges with newer leaders stepping up. How can you help people feel more confident with actually asking questions instead of telling? So being a macro manager rather than a micromanager, if you will.
Yeah, so my view in terms of values is that humility is a super important value. A servant leader and somebody that is humble is very rare, very powerful when managing teams. I do believe it flows down. When you're leading teams and you come with an agenda, which is, I'm not going to tell you everything, but I encourage you to challenge in a safe place where you know that we're going to listen to you, because everybody has value and adds value, then that does create a different environment. When I think about my guys, if I step out of line, I give them permission to call me out on this. It's quite a powerful place to be, because as a team, I know we are very successful. It's the fact that they are super inquisitive that means that we can actually leapfrog and make a lot of progress. So I encourage people to ask questions, meaningful questions. They need to be thought through questions, because you genuinely want to get a result, or you genuinely don't understand something. My commitment is I want to make sure that you fully understand what it is we're trying to deliver. You've got to work as a team. A lot of young people come through and they get progression very, very early in the career. And that comes with the risk, because they haven't quite built on how they manage those conversations. They're not quite at the place where they know how to ask the questions in a structured way. In fact, I'll give you a really nice example here, is that when I joined both Hills and Entain, compliance always said to me, Rob, there's no way that, because you guys are commercial, there's no way that you guys can get involved in compliance at all. So they can't even attend the meetings. And it took 3 years at Hills and a couple of years at Entain, where we could all get round the table, because we all understood that we had a single goal, and I take it as seriously as anybody else in the business. So building that very strong relationship that says, I'm not going to push on something that is going to jar with you. We can all talk about the challenges that we're experiencing. And as a collective, we are so powerful. One of our guys had always said to me before is that if Entain only knew what Entain knows, we have so much knowledge in the business, but not many people share it. Yeah. It's quite a powerful piece, because when you bring all of that experience together, you're very powerful in the market.
Yeah, and I think just asking the right questions is key, because people are sat in their silos, not intentionally, but are sat in their silos, thinking and struggling perhaps with communicating the exact things that other people need to know. So how, like in a large organization, moving from, Victor Chandler, Stan James, even, I'd imagine it was quite intimate as well, to a far larger organization, which is now Volk Hills and Entain. What are the big differences you feel between being in a small organization and being in a large organization and managing those complexities?
So there's a number of points there. Entain has a lot of politics involved in this business. So you spend a lot of time managing up. That's far different to a private entity like Chandler's was back in the day, or Stan's back in the day, where you could just make a decision and move on. Now you can't just make a decision, because you've got to go through committees and get approval, which means that storytelling is very important, that it's clear and simple and that people understand it. I was away a couple of weeks back on a high performance leadership meeting with some of our guys. And 2 days in, I went to the guy that was leading the session and said to him, listen, Keith, in terms of how I show up in the meeting, don't be put off if you see me there in the corner, quiet and not necessarily contributing. So you've got to understand that I'm a deep thinker, which means that when we're discussing problems or how we fix those problems, what's going on in the back of my mind is picking up on all of the different touch points that that's going to impact to make sure that it does actually work. And he turned around and said to me, Rob, you've been operating in stealth mode all your life. And what was amazing about that statement is, yes, it was true. Okay. Is that because I'm an introverted thinker, because I'm very happy to go away and let it consume me for the next week, I don't necessarily share that information with other people. That piece of work around stealth was quite an eye-opener for me, because you've got to balance that out. You can go away and work in stealth mode, which is absolutely fine, but then you have to come back and be transparent and share the ideas and share the plan. When I sit and talk with our guys, I might have 90 or 20 projects working in the background, and none of them would necessarily know about that, because I'm sneaking back into stealth mode. So very much in terms of my leadership style, working in those different environments, especially in an operation like Entain, where there's a lot of politics involved, I have to over-index on the transparency piece. And I have to really talk about that storytelling piece, which is the unifying story. Yeah. So, hey, this is what we're doing, guys. Here's the detail of it, and keep doing that. Because if you remember, working in a super fast-paced business, we're doing something this week, and in 2 weeks' time, it might be totally different again. So you have to over-index on the communication piece and make sure that everybody's coming on the story.
One of the things I really loved about what you just said there, Rob, about being a deep thinker, is that we are not all the same. Very often, I think, as stepping into a new role, we think we need to fit in some sort of managerial leadership box, and we all need to operate in the same way or think in the same way. And that's simply not true. One of the things I love about you, Rob, is that you communicate that quite well. You communicate how you might actually sit in that corner and be quiet for a minute because you're thinking through something. How's that changed over time? Is that an area that you've struggled with historically? Is that something that you've picked up and made your strength over time? How's that specific skill set of yours, that being a deep thinker, evolved over time?
The truth is, I'm probably more conscious of it now than I've ever been. And just to build on that, and I have shared this with you before, but I'm fascinated over just a single statement around happiness, fulfillment, engagement being found in the struggle of everything we do every day. And you can apply that to your personal relationships. You can apply that to your work environment. Instead of running away from challenges every day, I actually run towards them, because within that challenge is actually very, very likely I am going to find a level of engagement and happiness and fulfillment. So because I'm more conscious of it, I'm more inclined to throw myself into super challenging scenarios. My boys who are older now, when the rains come down, if we've had rain in the last week, the first thing they'll say to me is, Dad, Did you go out in the Jeep? Did you go and find some people that are stuck in the mud? And it's funny because we look back, and that's what we used to do. When the rain came down, we'd get some rope in the back and go and find the challenges that are out there. That was just a subconscious thing. It's always been there in terms of running into challenges, a lot of deep thought around those challenges and how we solve for them. It does come with a risk, because what I find is that will consume you. It does consume me every day, all day, probably 7 days a week. So you have to be super conscious that, well, I do need to switch off. I do need to stop thinking about these things and focus on family and focus on other areas of my life in terms of well-being. But it is a superpower. So we all have our own superpowers, and it's important to understand that within the team environment, you don't want to have everybody that's a deep thinker.
Yeah. No, exactly.
That's not necessarily helpful, but I understand my place within the team.
Yeah.
And that's quite key, because that allows me to relax. That allows us as a team to perform very well, because we've thought it through in detail. The older I get, the more comfortable I am with who I am. Yes. I don't feel I have to necessarily go and prove anything. And if I don't feel like saying anything, I won't say anything. Unless it's meaningful and it's going to add value, then I'll jump in and we'll start talking about it. Up to that point, I'm very comfortable to keep quiet and just listen.
Key thing that you're talking about, right? Being yourself and not doing things that you think you should, or being a person that you think you should be, but actually just being yourself and communicating that out. One thing that you've just said there, Rob, is for a deep thinker like you, one of the big important things is switching off, right? Because you know you're going to have running thoughts continuously. What is something that you do to help you switch off?
Yeah, it needs to be a total distraction for myself. And that tends to be around exercise, getting out, riding a bicycle. But something I'm conscious of is that I'm awake at 5 o'clock in the morning. For many years, I've spent that time lying in bed trying to go back to sleep, instead of actually embracing it and getting up and thinking maybe my brain is trying to tell me something. Because my best times of the day are actually first thing in the morning. Getting up at 6, where you've got really good quality quiet time, no distractions, no noise, really allows me to think about what it is I'm doing during the day, plan for the day. So I'm not spending my whole day in that deep thinking stage. I actually assign time in the day to do that. Do it first thing in the morning when there's nobody around. Read as much as I can as part of my distraction, and then plan the day ahead of me. So when I come into the office and the meeting is from 9 o'clock through to 5 o'clock, meeting after meeting, I don't have to go and rush home and carry on working, because I've already prepped and planned early in the day. And that helps me get control of this crazy animal that we work. And that allows me to spend time and be in the moment with the family. When I'm sitting at home and I'm talking to my wife or my boys, I'm actually there. I'm not deep in thought thinking about something else. And you've got to be ruthless about these things. You really have to assign time, very clearly assign time to say, at this time of the day, I'm going to be doing this. And when I finish work, I'm going to dedicate my time. I'm going to be in the moment, and I'm going to be there for that session of the day. And actually, what's fascinating is when you break that down, you really don't have a lot of time left. So when you break it down and say, well, I'm going to do my emails between 6 and 7, and I'm going to have my deep thought between 7 and 8, and then I'm going to have my breakfast and what have you until 9, I'll be in the office, and then go all your meetings. You know what I mean? When you start to break it down, you begin to realize, how did I ever get anything done without really planning the day ahead of me? Yeah. No wonder you get home and you're tired, because you're trying to log on and read content. Bear in mind, regulatory changes. There's a lot of documentation that you've got to read and try and keep in your mind. So I'm doing all of that stuff at the wrong time of the day. Yeah, I need to do it at the right time of the day. Everything seems to flow massively.
Yeah. Just a quick word of encouragement that if you're also struggling to switch off or find a bit of balance in life, then that's really normal. Many of the iGaming leaders that I've spoken with really struggle with that as well. It's very typical for being in a high pressure, fast paced industry, and difficult to kind of break out of that. Now, if that's something that you want some support with, we've actually created the iGaming Leader Mastermind, where we help people live, lead, and perform at their best using science-proven methods to help them achieve sustainable peak performance. If that's something that you want to join, please head over to igamingleader.com and apply. Let's get back into the interview. One of the expressions I love, maybe this is one that you're going to think about for a long time as well, is that if your most important work, the best of you, instead of what's left of you. And I think most
Lovely.
people actually do it the other way around, right? They do their most important work after all the back-to-backs, whenever they have time. One of the key things is to take charge of your time and calendar and align that with how your brain works. You're up early because that's how your brain works, and you feel energetic. So align your most important work with that. I think it's key.
Finding the balance is very important.
The last two questions for you, Rob. First, what are the skills or behaviors that you look for in leaders that you try to employ within your teams? What are some of the things that you find really important in the team that you manage?
There's a statement that says, love the one you're with. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter what the conditions are. And that's very important because the people that I employ and the teams that I work with, it's not going to be plain sailing every day. It's going to be challenging months, maybe even challenging years. And so how those individuals turn up and behave is super important to you. In fact, the experience counts for a lot, but the behavior counts for more.
Yep.
Okay, so when you wake up in the morning, you have to put on that game face, even if you don't want to put it on. You have to, because as leaders, people are looking up to you. There's a funny saying that the children of the people that you manage know you by name. So when the people you manage go home, they talk about you. They talk about you as a leader. They know you by your first name. So it's very important that, there's a couple of values that I really drive forward. I would rather somebody be humble and have honesty and integrity. I can work with that. People that are engaged and genuinely want to be here. We can teach you about how to run this business, and we can teach you the skill sets that you need to run the business. But I can't train in the behaviors. So those for me are super, super important. We practice a lot of listening to what people have to say. I don't have all the answers. I don't want to have all the answers either, because as a team, we need to contribute and get the solution over the line. Really good at listening, a lot of humility, and we are here to serve at the end of the day, believe it or not.
Yeah, it's true. I love it. And especially, be the manager that you wish you had, right? It's such an important piece of advice, I think, because managers have more impact on your happiness than most other people in your lives. So that is such a crucial piece. Really love that.
Yeah, look, we are super fortunate that we can lead the business. The problem with a lot of people is they want to be told what to do. If you think about it as your business, how would I run my own business? What decisions would I make? When there's a lot of fact in the business in terms of payroll, and you see that the company is taking a decision around restructure, you apply it to yourself. What would I do in that situation? That means we take ownership and responsibility for how we do things. Unless you turn up to work like that, the challenges you're going to face is that you won't be around very long, because you have to be adaptable. You've got to understand that the business structure is going to change and the way the business is run. If you look at regulation, for instance, I always say regs is going to come to everybody's door. It doesn't matter what market you're in, whether you're Germany, Austria, Spain, it doesn't matter. Regulation will come, whether it's marketing, affordability, or player protection. It's going to come to your door. So you have to be forward thinking, open to saying, well, hang on, maybe I need to explore some of the areas that are not within regs today. It's just a mindset. If you think about the tobacco industry, they went through exactly the same challenges as we pretty much have in gaming. So you got marketing prohibitions and underage consideration to factor in. We think outside of the box. What if there was a total prohibition on gambling for 18 to 25s? What would we do in that environment? It's just how you think about these challenges that is super important.
And then my final question for listeners that might want to have as an impactful career as you've had over the 20 years, what's one piece of advice that you would offer maybe your younger self just starting out in gaming?
I have thought about this quite often, and I think that the biggest challenge is the pace that I've moved at over the last 20 years. It hasn't been quick enough. And what I mean by that is, like when I was at Victor's, I was there for 7-8 years. In hindsight, I should have moved quicker. I should have taken opportunity quicker, because only moving from Chandler's to Stan's did I realize that there's something different out here for me. Victor Chandler ran through my blood. I was super passionate about the brand. I never wanted to leave that brand. But the minute I left, I suddenly realized there's something bigger out there for me. When I left Stan's, I was with Stan's for about 15, 16 months. When I left Stan's, I then went and worked in the startup casino. The experience is, wow, there's something different out here for me. And then going over to EPG, which is a payment gateway, is something new out here for me. So what I found is that my seasons were shorter and shorter. And if you think of Chandler's as 8 years, and then every other season I've had is 4 years or 2 years, I'm conscious that change does happen and that I should embrace it and move with it rather than sitting in a season, because I think we're all guilty of this. We sit in a season and we just stagnate in that season. If the season is finished, so my encouragement to anybody is if you're feeling that the season is finished, then get up and move. Don't stay in that and stagnate, because there's so much opportunity out there. I'd rather be going out and taking a rest for something which is bigger out there that's going to help me develop and grow and sit in a stagnant position for many years. So yeah, I think for me, if I could play it back, I would definitely move quicker and be more intent around what it is I want to do. One of the ladies that worked here, Julie Dolman, she was running the UK for a couple of years. And Julie always had this fascinating way of visualizing decision-making. She always said to me, Rob, what are your must-haves? What are your 5 must-haves around decision-making? So, if your must-have means that I need development, or I need a bigger salary, or I need a certain location, or I need to be close to my family, or I need to be healthy, or, what are the must-haves that you need in order to either stay in the job that you're doing or move into something else? And if your must-haves are that 4 out of the 5 or 5 out of the 7, whatever it is, are all crosses, that's the wrong decision. But if the must-haves are all ticked, then you move. So if I'm sitting in a position and I'm feeling stagnated and I'm not getting developed, just go through the process of what are my must-haves. And if they're not there, then the season's over and it's time to move.
Yeah. Fantastic note to end on. Thank you very much, Rob. And thank you for being so open and honest and sharing all of your experience. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, yeah.
Wow, what a great conversation with Rob. It left me so inspired because we all know the challenges that Entain's been through over the last few years. So him opening up about how he's gone through that and what kind of leader he is, I found really insightful. It left me with 3 specific takeaways. The first one was that it's really about being authentically you, right? Embracing yourself and who you are and leading in a way that is true to your values. It's such an important skill to have as a high performance leader. The second thing is that it's all about embracing change as well. Businesses will go up and down and it's inevitable. So as a high performance leader, your ability to ride with that change and embrace change is such a key skill in also helping your teams become high performance teams. And the third thing, which I loved the most, was his approach to actively seeking out challenges, because he finds happiness and engagement on the other side of that challenge. And that is so true, isn't it? Every single dream that we have goes to die inside of our comfort zone. It's outside of that comfort zone where all our dreams happen. So I really loved his approach there. So that's it for this week. If you found this episode helpful, please leave a rating and review. It helps us so much with other iGaming leaders like you finding this podcast. And if you've already done that, you're an absolute legend. Make sure you send it to somebody else that might need to hear this podcast as well. So that's it for this week. Next week, we're interviewing Dmitry Belyanin. He is the CEO and founder of actually 3 different companies, a serial entrepreneur, has been in the industry for 17 years, real high performer, has got some fantastic insight on what it requires to move from starting off early in your career all the way to, in his case, running 3 different businesses. So I would love for you to see that episode next week. I hope to see you there, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care.